Welcome, everybody. We've got Mark Connolly here. He's from Vail, North Carolina. He owns Canine Command. He is a good friend of the show. He's been on, he was my North Carolina state for the podcast. So, Mark, welcome back and finally in person.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
So I was so glad when you did this, when I reached out, because I think this is important for people when they have a working type, very strong breed in the home, but the home isn't active, if you will. They want that personality. They want that strong dog. So before we get into our three concepts, I guess my first question is, do you see this a lot? Because I feel like we do.
Yeah, I definitely see it a lot. And it switches from breeds, like obviously Malinois are getting more popular now and stuff like that. But me being more of a German Shepherd guy, I get a ton of German Shepherds and they come from, your standard pet quality, American bred type to your working lines and stuff are getting more popular as well.
I have to quote you from our podcast because I remember you talked about some shepherds are nerve bags. And I got to tell you, every time I think about that statement at least once a week, and it always gives me a chuckle hearing it. And I think you're spot on. So again, one more question before we get into the three concepts here. You've been doing this for quite some time, so I think you've seen this transition of generations of shepherds from when you first started to now. Is it a big difference from what you're seeing from before?
Well, I think it's when you're dealing with working line shepherds. My focus is going to be mostly on shepherds when I mention working lines. Okay, but what I see mostly is dogs have been bred a little bit differently as far as the character traits to adapt to training styles. Back when I first got started, everything was very heavy handed. I mean, if you look at like Schutzen back in the 80s and 90s and stuff like that, the dogs looked a lot differently. They had to breed dogs that could withstand heavy handed type stuff.
Wow.
And now you're seeing dogs that, you're looking for a different sort of pep in the dog and stuff. Don't make a mistake. There's still some really hard ass dogs that are in sport and everything. But they're breeding for different purposes to match their training styles.
Mm-hmm. And it was pretty, like, even reading the Keeler book, it was very heavy handed. And that was what, 60s, I think, right?
Yeah, 1962, the book came out.
Yeah, and even I remember reading that, and there was a couple of times it just kind of make you go, "Ee, that's a little harsh," but that was the time, though,
Well, it's the time, and it's still a method that I use on a daily basis here. And I don't want to just detract from the show, but it's we can always look at the few negative things that really make us a little bit uncomfortable. But it's the picture of it all. And realistically, you can't read the book from page 1 to page whatever the ending is. You can't read the book unless you put it to practice and then see how it works. And those things that make people uncomfortable, if you've done the method properly, which most people have never done, but if you do the method properly, you never have to deal with that problem solving chapter that makes everybody so uncomfortable.
I remember I'm guilty. I jumped to the back to look at problem solving. Just
everybody does.
I admit it.
Yeah.
And you look at it and you're like, yeah, it's different. But
most of the people that have a really strong opinion of old methods of like Keeler dog training, first of all, they don't know how to spell the word. They don't know how to say it. They don't know how to spell it. They don't know how to write it. And so their opinion on the method is never really strong with me, because if they can't spell it or write it, they can't train it.
Yeah.
That's a great point.
Yeah, that's great.
Moving on.
Yes, moving on. All right, concept number 1. You've got somebody with a working line German Shepherd in the home, but you've got two people that are working 8 to 5, 9 to 5. What's the first thing that they can do to help fulfill that dog?
Well, let me first, a little thing before I say that is, obviously we're dealing with working line dogs. Ideally, when you get one, you should be working the dog. I mean, that's the ideal situation. So we're talking about the non-ideal, all right, trying to make it work in a pet home. So number 1 is that, I'm going to ramble a little bit here, but I got a little bit of notes written down so I don't ramble off too much. But don't try to change the dog. Don't try to change what it is, okay? I think that's a key thing. Somebody may have had this breed at one time and then they get another, but this one's a working line dog and they want it to be like the other dog. They want it to be trained like the other dog. They're not going to be the same. Okay. So you can't change it, and it's unfair to try and change it. These dogs are genetically bred. They're genetically wired differently. They're purpose bred. And so you must accept what it is that you have and figure out, how do I fulfill this dog? How do I train this dog to make this into a dog that can be part of the family? And there are some working line dogs that are just not going to make good dogs in the family, depending on your family environment with kids and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's just not going to work out. But so if you go into this and you're expecting, I got this, you say, a lot of people talk about like Czech Shepherds. If I got this like working line Czech Shepherd per se, this is what we see a lot. Don't expect it to be this great family dog with limited training, limited rules, limited structure, like maybe your lab or something may have been at one point in time. It's not going to happen. Okay. It's simply not going to happen. You have to be willing to adapt, train. And if you can't adapt and train this working dog, you might want to talk to the breeder, and you might want to consider rehoming, because it's not going to work out and it's going to be a rough road for the rest of the dog's life, for everybody in the family and stuff like that. It's just unfair to the dog. So that, tying into that on number one is, just understanding that working dogs are really, really good at finding something to do. Okay. So they're going to find a job. If you don't give them one, they're going to find something to do. And we see that, and it's what we call problem behaviors. Okay. And it's just it's the dog trying to exhaust some of these drives. Okay. So you're not going to like the choices they're going to come up with, so you've got to teach the dog to do certain things so they're not doing the other things.
Yeah, because it could be finding something to do. It could be the couch. It could be chasing after the mailman. It could be the walls. The
chasing the cat, tearing the blinds off every time somebody makes a package delivery. And these are things like, especially like with Shepherds, the dog's wired that way. You know what I mean? So you got to work with that. You can't just think it's going to go away. And that's another big thing on that too. When I talk about not changing the dog, what I hear all the time is people say, well, I'm sure the dog will grow out of a lot of this when it gets a little bit more mature. No, not if it's a good working dog. It won't. I mean, there's 13-year-old Malinois that are still working on the road. Wow. They're a little bit slower physically. Mentally, the dogs can still do the job just fine. So, don't expect there to be this big jump off the cliff where the dog's just a couch potato. It's not going to happen.
Yeah, I think it's important when you said, as far as like, don't try to change the dog, because for us in the pet dog world, we certainly see the comparison of the senior dog that was 12 or 13 years old, just passed away. 2 or 3 months goes by, we get the puppy, but the puppy isn't like the senior dog anymore.
Right.
And I think that's kind of what you're referring to in a different context here with the working type dog. Is this is not going to be the Basset Hound lying down on the couch.
Right. And something else I wanted to touch on before I move on to the next concept was, you mentioned earlier about our previous podcast where I mentioned nerve bag. And and so I wanted to address that a little bit. So, because we're talking about working line, purpose bred dogs, right? Well, even if you say take a German Shepherd, that is that, right? You have other German Shepherds that are being bred for size and color and all this kind of stuff, and they're not really thinking about purpose bred. No matter how far away you get from the working end, there's still going to be some primal stuff going on in there that is true to the German Shepherd. Okay. But where you get that nerve bag, basically, is you got a dog that is very suspicious of people. It has a defensiveness about it. Okay. These are things that you look for in the traits of a German Shepherd. They should be aloof of strangers, right? But they also don't have strong nerve, So then you start getting this bad cocktail, right? Dog that doesn't have the ability to control these impulses. And so, when we're talking about working line dogs, but a lot of the pet quality, sort of backyard bred, if you would, German Shepherds and stuff like that, they're still going to have a lot of these things. And so a lot of this is still going to apply. Yeah.
All right. Number 2, what do you got?
Number 2 is just, it's your basic run of the mill thing. You're going to tell almost everybody, but I think it's so important with these is, I get people that come all the time and they say, hey, look, I don't know what we got to do to, help me with this dog. I walk this dog 3 to 5 miles a day and nothing's changing, and it's like, wow, I wish I walked the dog 3 to 5 miles a day. I just train them. You know what I mean? I train them. I give them stuff to do, and that's mental. All right. So physically taking your dog for a walk is great, but they need mental stimulation. All right. So, there's a million things you can do to provide mental stimulation. If you're not going to give the dog per se a job like sport or protection or search and rescue or whatever, then you're going to want to find things that you can mentally challenge the dog with. Number one is going to be obedience. Okay. Obedience is mentally stimulating. You're giving the dog something that it has to focus on, other than the things that it wants to focus on. Okay. So that's a huge one. And it's a combination of, and you can incorporate exercise and obedience into one activity. You know what I mean? So, you can incorporate, game of tug. You know what I'm saying? Like tug can be part of the motivation. If it's a dog that's driven for that, you're physically exhausting the dog, and then you're mentally exhausting the dog, trying to get the dog to process mentally, how do I earn that again?
Yeah.
So, taking long walks is great, but part of those long walks should be structured walk. It should be an obedience walk. You should be doing different things during your walk. Just letting the dog just lead you, which is what most people do before they come to us, is the dog's just basically taking them for a walk, and that's not going to satisfy the dog.
Yeah. One thing that we get a lot up here, obviously, is indoor activities, especially because we've got a foot of snow and it gets below zero. I think you're a New Englander native, aren't you?
Yeah, but I don't like cold.
So where I'm coming from.
Yeah.
People always ask, what can I do with my dog indoors, winter activities? So your answer, obedience, what is it?
Well, obedience is going to, it is and it isn't. So obedience is going to always be a primary thing for me, because you got a working line dog. You're going to have good obedience on the dog. Okay.
Yeah.
It's going to need leadership. And so that's paramount with the dog. But you can play scent games in the house. There's all kinds of things that you can do. And there's things you can do that doesn't have to be like thinking I'm going to be on a competitive level. You can teach the dog to track in your yard. You know what I mean? You can have the kids go and hide and play search and rescue games and stuff with the dog, just fun stuff. But it's, and another big one that goes along with that. So you got the tug work, you got scent games, is a lot of people love to play fetch with their dogs, so they can get a good game of fetch going with a tennis ball or a chuck it or whatever it may be. That's all great, but that's purely physical. It doesn't take any mental stimulation for the dog to go back and forth to go and get something.
Yeah.
So if you've got a dog with a lot of drive, I would be throwing this stuff into tall grass and stuff like that, and what I call like a controlled retrieve. Okay. I want the dog to see it, and I want the dog to go into hunt drive, and I want the dog to have to use its nose and search for it. And it is incredibly fun. I mean, the enthusiasm you see when the dog, after it goes and it searches and it finds it and comes running back to you, like, look what I got. These are ways of releasing all that.
It's interesting you say that. I was just talking, I did a video last week on, removing stress from your dog and some things that you can do. And one of it, I talked about play and fetch. And again, we're going to touch on the snow here because we're in Vermont. I always said, like, throw the ball into the snows. Yeah. The dog will look to see where it last disappeared, and then the nose has to trigger. That term controlled retrieve, obviously your world's a little different than my world.
Yeah, that's an old term that came from U.S. Customs method of dog training. That's still sort of a foundation for me. And basically what we would do is we would do a bunch of sight retrieves. We would hold the dog by the collar. We would throw it out there and let the dog see where it landed. They would retrieve it a few times. Then we would hold the dog by the collar. I'd throw it out into some tall grass. Then I would spin the dog around where it loses that. It loses sight of it. And when I spin the dog around, I let it go. It runs out where it last thought it's seen. But dogs are usually gonna search short of it. So you work into the wind. So you get downwind of it. The dog starts short. It's thinking, I think it was in this area. And then they catch the odor and they work into it. And it's just so fulfilling for the dog. And it doesn't have to be for purposes of drug detection or anything like that.
No.
You can just have a tennis ball. It's got your scent on it. Throw it,
Yeah. That's awesome. Guess what my kids are going to do this weekend?
I know.
I'm going to hide them behind the snowbank.
That's a hide and seek in the house.
Yeah. All right. Two awesome concepts here. Number 3. What's your number 3 here?
Number 3 is really going to be about prevention. And I know that you're familiar with this and stuff like that, but it's what we as dog trainers call nothing in life is free. You know, it's basically just establishing a leadership program with how you raise your pup and your dog and stuff like that. So I'm a big advocate. What I tell people is don't treat your house like a playground. So one of the first questions that I ask people when they come in for training, where's your toys kept in the house? And if they're all over the house, and a lot of people say, well, he's got his own little basket over here in the corner and he picks the one that he wants. No, we don't do that. Put that stuff away. Toys come out when you decide they come out, and it becomes an engagement exercise that you do with the dog. Again, this is mental stimulation. What do I have to do to get Mark to play with me? What do I have to perform to get food? You know, these are the things that I'm trying to do. So I'm going to control these resources. I don't want, and one of the reasons why we do this so much with working dogs is, particularly shepherds and Malinois and stuff like that, is the drives that they have are going to lead to possessive qualities. You're going to develop resource guarding. Okay. Yeah. So toys and food, if you leave food out all the time, if you have toys out all the time, these dogs are going to naturally get possessive. I mean, these are qualities that we like in those dogs that are bred into them. And so we don't want that stuff out. I want to control it. I'm going to prevent these problems from happening. And when I want to play with a Kong or a tug toy, it's you and me, not you in the corner with it. You know what I mean? Yeah. I want full engagement, and then I'm going to put you up happy where you want more, and I'm going to put the toy away where you want to do this again.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So that's a big thing, but controlling all that, you know, along with the nothing in life is free, as you know, we, I don't lavish dogs with tons of, you know, affection all the time. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, I love my dogs. I'll rub their belly if they'll let me. But I mean, I'm not the kind, I don't want my dog constantly bumping into me, just constantly wanting attention and thinking that that's the trigger to get it, you know? So they earn attention they earn affection. They earn their food. I'm not big on like existential food where the dog has to work for food for its entire life and stuff. I don't really do that, but I do it with puppies. You know, I like to imprint the puppies to certain things. So I'm going to use food as much as possible, but I get away from it pretty quick. But again, I don't train dogs for performance, for sport and stuff. So other people are going to stick with that a little bit longer. But yeah, you know, and obviously with that nothing life is free too, crating. You know, if you've got a working dog in your house and you're not utilizing a crate, that's going to be probably the first thing you're going to need to switch. Again, when you're not watching that dog, it's going to find a job. You're not going to like the one it chooses.
It's interesting. Last week I was talking with a client. They had the proverbial box of toys in their house. And she had said that the dog would go over, grab one out, bring it to its bed, lie down with it, wait a couple minutes, go get another one, bring it to its bed, lie down, and would do this. And pretty soon would have like 4 or 5 or 6 toys around it.
Right.
And of course, inside, I'm just like, here it comes. This is the start. Well, it's beyond the start of this resource guarding of it's hoarding, you know?
Yeah, certainly.
That's a dangerous game too. I think any trainer, anytime we've gone into the home and you see the toys everywhere, that's like the number one. We got to get rid of that stuff.
Yeah, and then particularly so if it's a family dog and you got kids and stuff like that, you know, there's no need to have that, you know. But people think about raising a dog like they do thinking a kid, and there's a lot of similarities, but they've got to separate themselves from that, and they've got to. That's probably the biggest problem that everybody has with dogs, but working dogs even more so, is we have to stop thinking like a human, and we need to ask ourselves, why is the dog doing what it's doing? We have to look at it from their lens, you know, and especially these dogs that have lots of drive, you know. So if your dog is doing, you know, this behavior here, you can't just say, well, how do I stop it? You got to ask yourself, why is it doing it in the first place?
You brought up the kids thing. I've got 2 young kids. You get some new toys for Christmas. Here we are. It's the beginning of February. Some of those toys have already lost their luster. Because they're around a lot, you know. And the same thing happens with dogs too. You get them that toy, they play with it for a week. Well, he doesn't like the toy. I'm going to get him a new one, and then the new one He doesn't like that after a couple of weeks. So we go get him another new one. And then this is just this vicious cycle.
Well, I mean, just to tag on to what you just said, you take anybody who trains for like IGP or any kind of sport, right? The dog never gets to keep the toy. You know, they'll let the dog win and enjoy it, but they want the dog to be engaged. They want the dog to come back and play tug and stuff like that. And then they take it away. And the next time you work, and the same thing with like a drug dog or a bomb dog, you know, they're going to get their reward, but they don't sit in the back of the cruiser with the reward all night long because it's not going to want to work. You know, so you take it away, and then the dog is just that jazzed up to try and work for it to get it again. You know, we do the same thing with our pet dogs, you know. And it goes, it's just like food too. I mean, you don't create a finicky eater by changing things up all the time, you know, but that's a whole nother topic.
I think it's important too for people to understand that, like, even if it's just toys, much like training too, there has to be a specific beginning and ending to that activity of, if you're going to play with the dog, grab the toy out of the closet or wherever it is, go and play with your dog. And then when you're done, take it away and go put it away. So you have that structure to go with it. Yeah,
absolutely. And I know we're getting ready to wind down, and maybe there's some questions and stuff, but I think one of the things I wanted to add in here too is just that, you know, if you take on this task of trying to bring a working dog into a pet home, is you have to be able to enjoy this challenge, because it's going to be a challenge. You have to know that this is going to be challenging. It's not going to be challenging just for the first year of the dog's life, like a lot of puppies. You need to be very passionate about training the dog. And what that means is I get lots of people like that will contact me, and I know you do as well. They'll contact you before they even pick their puppy up. And like, I want to schedule training, right? That's awesome. I love people like that.
I love it. It's so nice.
It really is.
But, and when the training is done, that doesn't mean the training is done. So when you're done working with me, you still need to be passionate, especially with dogs like this, because, you know, they're still going to go back to trying to find something to do. So this is you teach the dog like a core skill set, and you work that for the rest of the dog's life, you know, just to keep things fresh. Training needs to be part of the lifestyle with all dogs, but working dogs, it's huge.
Cool. Mark, thank you so much. These are 3 awesome concepts. This is way more than I thought we would get out of this. This is fantastic.
Well, it's really just 3 things that just came to mind this morning. Like I said, there's probably a million other things. When we end this, I'm probably like, dang, I should have said this. You know, limited time.
It's all right. There's a lot of good stuff here. Tell people where you are, Mark, and how they can find you.
We're on Facebook, you know, Facebook.com/Canine Command. We're on Instagram, all that good stuff. You know, we're kind of on all the social media stuff. Most of my stuff is on Facebook. I don't do a lot of YouTube. It's all my YouTube stuff is private for clients only. Yep. But yeah, if they want to get in touch with us, do it through Facebook. And our website is caninecommand.com. Everything we do is on there, including prices. So
awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time. And
absolutely. Anytime.
I'll be in touch with you.
All right, man. Take care.
All right. Thanks.